We're back online, live, Children's Ministry, Lecture 2. And it goes along with Lecture 25. So you'll see online 25/2 or 24/1. So that just lets you know that some of these are new classes, so they don't really start at Lecture 24, because there's been no lectures in them. You could argue that Romans, New Testament Survey Romans, should be Lecture 1, but we're going on with Lecture 24 or 25 with that. This one's entitled Losing the Kids. From a book, or some of this at least, from a book called Keeping the Kids by a guy named David Cloud. So all the non-bracketed item content is from this book. Otherwise it's from me, or unless I say where it's from. So, men and ladies, more than likely in your career or time serving in a church, you're going to be ministering to kids, to children. And it is no easy task. Plus you have all different varieties, really ages from nursery to teens. And even you can say it goes to the young adults. The most concerning issue to examine within the topic of children's ministry, this is my view, is not what curriculum to use, or whether or not to employ corporal punishment, or should there be a junior church or not, and all these things. No, the most concerning issue is whether or not the children's ministry is going to prepare the kids for becoming strong, committed Christians that will enthusiastically commit to the direction and convictions of the adult ministries when they're that age. So that's my view of it. We're getting them ready for being an adult in this church. Not just keeping track of them, hopefully everything goes okay, make them happy, and maybe get some spiritual input. That's not the goal. Hopefully you don't think that's the goal. Even in the nursery, that's not the goal. But definitely beyond that. And this is led by the senior pastor. Most children's ministries are geared at, making kids happy and wanting them to come back the next time, instead of preparing them for becoming a committed Christian as an adult. Now this is no easy task, because you do kind of got to make them happy. Especially if their parents don't go to this church, or don't go to any church. Why, pray tell, will they ever want to come back if it's, this is serious business. And you're in my Sunday school class, we're memorizing 1,000,000 scriptures, and you got to know Baptist doctrine down cold by the end of your by the time you're 7 years old. Man, what? I'll go to this other church maybe. So I understand this, and we'll talk about, and probably spend a few lectures talking about compromise. Not sin, but where you know that these kids need to learn these things. But how do you get them to pay attention? How do you get them to go along with it? You can't force them to. They're kids, and you can't put pain and pressure on them. You can't even force adults. How do you? Do you use, is it okay to have food? Is it okay to have prizes? Do you have a lot of levity and excitement and things blowing up? We'll talk about that. How far do you go? Why can't you have things blowing up?
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
He does. Within reason, within safety guidelines and the fire marshal and stuff. Well, do you offer little prizes when they do well? You get a star on the board? Oh, adults, in our Sunday school class, if you keep showing up, you're going to get a star by your name. Should we do stuff like that? Good question. The emerging church. A little bit about the emerging church here. You cold, brother? That noise you were hearing was Brother Ron putting on his parka. 72, but okay. The emerging church, which is the 21st century face of new evangelicalism, has targeted the children and grandchildren today, in today's fundamentalist churches. And this frightens me, Brother Cloud says, not because the emerging church is so powerful, but because the fundamentalist churches are so weak. The emerging objective appears feasible by the fact that a large percentage of the youth in fundamentalist type churches, well, they're not committed to the truth of God's Word from the heart, and are not prepared to take an educated stand. And so they're like Plato. These kids, you can bring this stuff on in, and they say, it's fine, it's fine. I don't know about our kids, but would to God it be that, let's just say, we got some crazy youth pastor in here, and I checked him out, but all of a sudden he's just doing this, and he's starting to play some music that I would say isn't right, doing some things that just doesn't seem quite right, that the kids would go, hey, this is not right! And talk to me or talk to an adult. Would the guy that was the case? Yeah. Maybe it is. The emergent church will eventually capture the majority of today's fundamentalists. So I'm not going to go into emergent church, but it's just this style of church where almost anything goes, so you can have a big crowd. They say, well, we obviously aren't going to sin, but they'll even have pizza instead of the unleavened bread. That type of thing. We really are stretching things beyond what you thought they were already stretched to. And these fast-growing churches into the thousands within 1 or 2 years follow this emergent church concept. And there's a whole bunch more there, and Brian McLaren is one of these guys that promotes it or started it. A large percentage of independent Baptist churches are already on the way to emergent apostasy through their present compromises. They are adopting the contemporary philosophy. They're rejecting separation from the world. They want a softer, gentler, less judgmental Christianity. Now, one church pops in my mind sometimes. It doesn't mean it's a horrible church, but the one in Indianapolis, which is one I'm familiar with, and there's been others like this, so it's just a bigger one. That I don't know all that's happened, but it's definitely changed its face. We'll just say that. There's many churches that have done this. They've changed their, style of music. And maybe even the Bible, but the style of music. They have a new pastor now, a younger pastor. They've got a new youth pastor who's got a goatee. Nothing wrong with a goatee necessarily, and an earring. It spikes his hair a bit. You know what I'm talking about? Those type of guys. I see their pictures in independent Baptist churches. Youth pastor, Joe Schmo. I'm like, And he's not wearing a suit and tie. Everyone else is, but he's got like a different type of shirt. Well, how else are you going to reach the cool dudes out there? They're not going to want to come to some stuffy place. Yet when it comes to protecting the next generation, the emerging church is only one enemy that the fundamentalist congregations face. Equally fierce and effective are, what is this pop culture we're in, popular culture, humanistic secularism, spiritual apathy, all these different things they're faced with, not just that. If a church sets their hearts on anything besides the Lord and compromises the truth in any way, you're going to start to lose your kids. What? To the world. Doesn't mean they're leaving your church. That will happen if you kind of hold things a bit. But once you start compromising, you're teaching the kids, compromise is okay, giving them more of an appetite for the world. And in the confines of a church you're doing that. Once the slippery slope of compromise is started down, he says, there is seldom any checking the progress. Edicts have gone. And this is true. Churches have changed. It's just one step. The picture they have in their mind is to go all the way to be like, let's say, Rick Warren's church. But they understand, we don't have drums up on the stage yet. How do we go to this point where we have drums on the stage? Well, we're not going to just one day have drums on the stage, probably. This is going to be this process. Obviously, one day you got to have drums on the stage, but you can't like have a piece of a drum up there. I wonder why that's there. How did that get there? Do you know? We just have a long-haired dude with sticks in his hand up there. No drums. He's just like a prop. You just get used to him. You'll see him again. The children's ministry, including the teen program, is often the first part of a church to change for the worse. It usually changes to a more worldly, contemporary style for a church pattern. Because it attracts more kids. This is a danger with some ministries in a church. They get to become their own identity. And if you're one that's leading it, that wants identity, wants to be known, wants to have praise and fame, you'll do a lot to have, because numbers are pushed so much. So you want to have more kids, more numbers. How do you do that? Well, you got to attract kids into it. How do you get the kids to keep coming back? How do you get the kids to invite their friends? So you come up with all these schemes and ways and food and candy. That's okay if you want to do that, but it just gets out of control to where it becomes a big worldly mess, and then you got a little bit of Bible in there. Ooh, makes it okay. Children are more likely to this is my stuff here, I think. Children are more likely to gravitate towards this and are less likely to be concerned about it. They're not concerned about your standards on that. So it's fertile ground for what we call change from where it's supposed to be. Oftentimes, the most liberal folks in a church are going to end up becoming your youth leaders. Now, not in this church, hopefully, but that's the way it kind of works. Because, do you have any clue why that would be? Why would the most likely person, if you're looking at leaders or ministry leaders and workers in a church, where are you going to find the most liberal? Not the adult Sunday school class, probably not treasury, deacon, no. It's going to be in the youth department. Because that's more of a flavor that's acceptable. They're kind of crazy, wild, thinking crazy thoughts. Of course, that's me. It's fine with that. But I'm glad I'm only the senior pastor. Good. Just take a look at good churches and their youth pastors. Well, these kids are raised in a somewhat worldly atmosphere through the 12 or so years that they're in the youth department. I've said this before. This is so true. They get used to all this fun, excitement, wildness, getting stuff, not really being serious about things, just having fun and being entertained. Then they become, well, they're 18. Finally, they got to leave the teen group, which is like the maxing out on all that. You think it's crazy at ages 3 to 5 or 7 to 10. And some of these churches that are growing fast, the teens, it goes even further. And music and all this. So then all of a sudden, they're out of that, and where do they go? Dun 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 dun. Dun 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 dun. They got to sit in the pews with the old people.
And fall asleep.
Yeah, so they don't like that. Let me go back to my notes. Of course you're not going to like that. And then they become young adults and are sent upstairs to where the adults are, and they are bored out of their mind. Thus, they leave their out-of-date church. I can't stay here. And go to, well, this large, fast-growing church, this non-denom down the street. I'll go to be with them. And it's been all exciting and crazy, so they go right where they left off at. And even more so. With flashing lights and incredible things. And there's some spirituality there. So you see the danger? Children's ministry workers? I'm not saying as a pastor that you need to not have any type of incentive type stuff and food and silly stuff. But be very careful, especially as you're getting up to the teen years, preteen and teen, that you're shaping them and getting them less and less reliant and used to fun and games, and more it's intense and serious until you're an adult and then you just go to sleep. The latest research shows that a frightful percentage of Sunday school children drop out of church in adolescence. Look at this one. Barna did this and found that 61% of young adults who were active in church as children and teens spiritually disengaged by their 20s, meaning they're no longer in church or rarely attend church services. 61%. Not quite 2/3. That's just, well, that's 10 years, 12 years ago, but that's real. That's real numbers. So you who teach kids in this church, if this number is true across the board, more than half of those kids are out of church by the time they're in their 20s. What can you do about it? I think there's some things you can do. Of course, there's some things that the parents need to do, and the person, the student does too. Answers in Genesis did their own survey of young adults between 20 and 29. And in this survey, 2/3, so up to 67% or so, of teens who regularly attend conservative or evangelical churches, they're gone by college age. So that's more on our type, not truly independent Baptist, but more on that genre. Gone! Follows the same stats. Ken Ham, founder of AIG, gives the following solemn warning. A mass exodus is underway. Most youth of today will not be coming to church tomorrow. We are one generation from the evaporation of church as we know it. Slowly but certainly the church of the future is headed toward the morgue and will continue to do so unless we come to better understand what is happening and implement a clear biblical plan to circumvent it. We'll be talking about that. This children's ministry course, I don't want it to be milquetoast. I want it to be meaty, challenging. Not like, well, teach about Joshua, that's an idea. Teach about Daniel and lion's den. We'll talk about that, but that's not the level we're going to be at. Hopefully. And then one more here, we'll take a break. Yeah. So, good question might be, how are we going to keep the kids in church? His book, Keeping the Kids. That's a very provocative concept. How can we keep them, keep coming back, but also once they're young adults, how are we going to keep them? Leah, you got any ideas? Every year, we get an account. We give, adults get to that. And every year that you are faithful to church services, once you turn 19, let's say, you get like $100.
Each week.
I wouldn't know what to do with it.
Give it to me. I've got plenty to do with that.
Give it to your mother.
Good answer. We'll see you when you're 19 and 20. Right? Serving the Lord in a good church, right? Levi?
He's going to be the music director, and she's going to be the pianist.
Kara?
There you go.
You say that, but according to the stats, 67% of you ain't. No, that's not our church, though. Our stats are hopefully good. Probably not 100%. No, they're not. Going on. Well, it involves both the home and the church. There's a little blip on this. The home and the church are two different divinely ordained institutions with different programs, but they should work together in harmony. There need not to be and should not be a conflict between the two. And it's particularly when these two institutions work in harmony under God's authority with His Word that the kids turn out right. So it's important to, of course, have the home backing up the church and the church backing up the home. Working what we call synergistically. Here's an interesting thought. The fact is that a good church can rarely overcome the influence of worldly homes, and a good home can rarely overcome the influence of a worldly church.
That's a good
One of the points of that is, there's lots, is that they got to go together. You got to have a good home and a good church.
one. Right.
Oftentimes you got a worldly home and a worldly church. No wonder our kids are horrible. But even if one is worldly, it's going to be a huge factor. So another part, and we'll probably have a lecture on this, with children's ministry, is the parents.
Yeah.
You getting involved with those parents. Even as a lady. We can get men involved. Well, amen. We've got to have both right or we may lose our kids. One more statement, then we'll take a break. All the church can do, this is not my statement, but all the church can do is give out the truth. The homes have got to make sure it goes into practice. Okay. Some truth to that. Not totally true, but if you don't got the home backing it up, you just had your 45 minutes of Sunday school time at junior church. You did a great job. You guys did great. You don't see it for a week, and then there's no reinforcement of it. Anywhere. How successful do you think you're going to be? Probably not too. Let's take a break.